Something you learned in your childhood, something positive, may be quietly making your adult relationships harder, and you have no idea what it is or why it's happening. It's not traumatic, it's not a scar, it's actually something that helped you, a habit that you built as a kid to protect yourself. It was one that worked so well, you just never stopped doing it. But what once helped you is the very thing standing between you and the relationship you want with your partner and with yourself. I'm Mel Schwartz, and this is Uncommon Sense. After 30 years as a marriage counselor, I've seen this show up in nearly every couple struggling to get through their impasses. In this episode, I'm going to show you how these old habits quietly shape your disagreements, your arguments, your blocks, the moments of disconnection, and how you can begin to see them and recognize them and release them. Let's begin. What is individual to yourself has to leak into your relationship. What do I mean by that? Well, my individual personality, coping mechanisms, the history of who I am and the history of who you are filters into our relationship with each other. It becomes our relationship. It's kind of like saying it's his issue, not my issue. That makes no sense. It becomes our issue. We're not separate any longer. But let me describe what I mean now by the notion of a coping mechanism. Early in life, things happen to us which are imperfect or hurtful. They may wound us, and we start to shift our personality to adjust for that wound, that embarrassment, something that really humiliated us. For example, I was working with an individual some years ago who told me that they were very tentative about speaking up in public or volunteering their thoughts. And I asked them, where did that come from? They recalled that in third grade, they raised their hand to answer the teacher's question. And they answered it in a way that made the whole class laugh at them. They felt humiliated. Wow, there was a coping mechanism that was formed by that third grader. She decided, I'm never going to raise my hand or volunteer my thoughts. I can't risk asking a stupid question or making a stupid comment. Now, how is that going to impact her throughout her life? That coping mechanism for early in life became like a wall that encased her and she couldn't break out of it. Another illustration that stands out in my mind that I'll never forget is when parents say to a child, think before you speak. The coping mechanism for being told to think before you speak is that I'm not going to risk making myself uncomfortable or someone else uncomfortable. And so you stay stuck. That's why change is hard. This blocks our authenticity, both individually and as a couple, because two people in a relationship have these personality masks where we're stuck in the original coping mechanism. Now, coping mechanism early in life is functional and it helps us. But decades later, we need to ask ourselves, do I still need that coping mechanism? It becomes a barrier to my growth, to evolving, to becoming who I can become. It kind of is like a state of inertia, and we start overcompensating. We struggle with it. We feel frustrated. A coping mechanism is an overcompensation, typically early in life, for something that embarrassed us, humiliated us, or we felt insecure about. But over time, it becomes rigid and hardened. Half a lifetime ago, I missed a step coming out of my house. I broke my foot. Sometime later, the pain from the broken foot wasn't a problem. I compensated for the broken foot. It was broken on the outside of my foot. So I put all my weight on the inside of my foot. I overcompensated. And in doing that, I caused more damage to the inside of the foot than where the bone was broken. That's what I mean by overcompensation. Think to yourself, where is your personality stuck in that overcompensation or protecting of a vulnerability? I'll share a coping mechanism with you that I overcame with a greater awareness. I was very shy as a child. Why? Well, I think my mother overprotected me. You know, we'd walk into a store. In those years, we called it a candy store. And she would want me to go up to the counter and ask for that pack of bubble gum, but I insisted that she did it. And she would placate me and go along with that. So I didn't learn to overcome my shyness and my introversion until it came time for senior prom in high school. I was a great Frank Sinatra fan, and I got up on stage and sang Strangers in the Night to the embarrassment and humiliation of all my friends. But it helped me getting on stage in college. I was an anti-war activist. I could stand up in front of hundreds or thousands of people and give a talk. It helped me overcome my shyness. I had to use the stage as a platform. If you had an alcoholic parent, you may have developed a coping mechanism where you decided you had to be a peacemaker or so well behaved that you wouldn't get that alcoholic parent to get angry with you. Or you simply went through life deciding to avoid confrontation. Now, how does that impact your relationship? I was working with a couple where somebody had been raised in just that environment. They had a volatile alcoholic parent, and they were a peacemaker, and they were afraid to confront anything that might create some disruption or unrest. So what happened in his marriage is instead of addressing the real things that were troubling him and needed to be discussed in his marriage, what he did instead is he would nitpick. He'd argue about little inconsequential things. His wife couldn't tolerate it. She said, "You're always carping and nitpicking on this or that." Why? Because he was still stuck in that childhood coping mechanism of not confronting. So, given childhood coping mechanisms like that, you become hypervigilant so as not to upset someone. Hypervigilance leads then to a personality mask. We're not our authentic, genuine self, and arguably, who is? But in our lives, the goal is to evolve and grow. It makes life interesting and stimulating. And we don't go there when we get stuck in the inertia of childhood coping mechanisms, which become like a suit of armor. We go around life clanking around with that armor. It doesn't do anything for us. So a coping mechanism is at first adaptive, but decades later, it becomes maladaptive. It's a burden we carry with us, and it impacts our relationships enormously. And think about how this also impacts us as parenting. The messages that we give to our kids, they're not genuine and authentic in terms of being open and vulnerable. Very often, they're the end product of our coping mechanisms. So let me provide some tips for you. Think to yourself, where do I feel out of balance? Where do I feel not genuine and authentic? Where's the place that you go to an automatic default when you're not feeling secure? It can be a thought like, I'm not smart enough, which leads me to not share my opinion. And what happens? Does that cause you then to become a private person? So often people will say, I'm a private person. What do they really mean? It means I'm sensitive to what you might think of me, so I'm not going to share much. And that's why I'm saying I'm a private person. First thing to do, identify your coping mechanism or mechanisms. We have more than one. Then ask yourself, do I still need this? Does this really serve me? Is it time to shed it? There's a concept called positive disintegration, which means flaying off old parts of ourselves that we don't need anymore. That's positive. That's growth. We want to shed the old, worn-out parts of ourselves that don't serve us any longer. And do the same in your relationships. Two people committed to doing that can have a growing, emerging relationship. What gets in the way of doing what I'm saying? Certainty. We get locked into certainty and what's familiar, even if it's dysfunctional and maladaptive. Paradoxically, we need to welcome discomfort. Discomfort breaks us free from the known, from the certain. Think of it like this. Would you rather be a human being, or would you rather be a human becoming? Now that sounds odd, but think about it. A being is stuck and fixed. I'd rather shift from being to becoming. A human being, a human becoming. To do that and to free yourself of old coping mechanisms which are rigid, you have to welcome uncertainty. You have to embrace possibilities. Instead of saying, who am I? Who are we? Ask yourself, how would I like to experience my life? Do I choose to be predictable, certain, fixed, inert, or flowing, open to change, to being present. Coping mechanisms grow old and they imprison us. So here's your uncommon sense. What was once positive and adaptive can become stuck. You no longer need it. You wore braces as a kid. Do you continue to wear them forever? When you learned how to ride a bicycle that had training wheels, isn't it time to shed the training wheels? Well, it's time to release the old coping mechanism and welcome in the birth of a new emerging quality. And by emerging or emergent, I mean bubbling up. It's full of vitality and growth and excitement. Embrace uncertainty. Let go of the old coping mechanism and see what rises in its place, which is brand new and can become passionate. Thanks. This has been Uncommon Sense. If you want to thrive in your relationship with others and with yourself, be sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm Mel Schwartz, and I'll see you in the next one.